No, you are not reading the title wrong. Yes, this is in fact the Nigerian perspective. I mean, you can probably tell from the accent if nothing else. And yes, I had a pretty fucking good experience in Genshin Impact. Dare I say, I even had a peak experience in Genshin Impact. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, version 6.7 in Genshin Impact just dropped not too long ago, and with it came a new world quest. When we look up at the moon, a quest that I went into strictly because, well, I play Genshin Impact. Even if my gameplay these days is mostly limited to the Archon quest and the world quest, I still play the game. I'm still very much interested in its lore. But even with all that being said, I had very little expectation going into this quest. I didn't expect it to give me anything beyond the classic Genshin Impact storytelling that I'd already become accustomed to. However though, this world quest genuinely surprised me. I mean, by the end of it, it gave me a level of satisfaction that I honestly hadn't experienced since Fontaine. A region that, in my opinion, still delivered the single best overall story Genshin Impact has ever told. And this quest came very close to giving me that same feeling, and that is saying something. And really, what is especially interesting is that just a couple of versions ago, Genshin Impact gave us the Asmoday World Quest, a quest that I have made my frustrations with very, very clear. I mean, I made video after video explaining why, in my opinion, that quest was, for a lack of better word, a complete waste of time. Statements that unsurprisingly earned me some very unique comments. So today we're going back to the basics. We're not comparing different gacha games against each other, no. We're comparing Genshin Impact to Genshin Impact, this new world quest against the Asmoday World Quest. And we're going to answer a very important question. What did the writers and developers manage to do here that they simply couldn't do with the Asmoday World Quest? That is what we're going to talk about in this video. So if you're into this kind of content, make sure to leave a like on the video. And if you played the World Quest, let me know your thoughts. How satisfied were you with it? Do you think this level of writing is something Genshin Impact consistently delivers? Or is it something that you believe we might only get in this particular quest? Let me know that in the comments below. And of course, don't forget to subscribe if you can be started on any of my future videos. Alright. Let's get into it. Now, if you followed me on this channel for a while, you would know that I used to make videos sharing my opinions on the Genshin Impact stories. But you would also realize that at a point I stopped. I mean, I had to, mainly because no matter what story I talked about, my opinions almost always lean more towards the negative than the positive. I mean, while I understood that a lot of these feelings were the fault of the stories themselves, I also came to realize that these same complaints I had of the current story also carried into the next story. I mean, the constant habit of telling rather than showing. The fact that entire quest lines would be filled with uninspired dialogue, only for everything to culminate in a single high-budget cutscene at the tail end of the quest. These are issues we have continued to see even as recently as version 6.6, the previous major story. And I say all that to say that I have genuinely wanted to make a video like this for a very long time. I mean, I've always wanted to talk positively about an experience that Genshin Impact has given me. So in light of that, before we get into comparing this world quest with the Asmoday Quest, I think it's only fair that we first acknowledge the one thing both quests unquestionably got right, and that is their presentation and their production quality. Now, this is interesting because when I say presentation, yes, I can admit that there has been some improvements in how dialogue scenes are handled, especially when it comes to the cinematography and camera work. But what absolutely dwarfs those improvements, at least from what I've noticed with the world quest in particular, is the environments themselves. I mean, in playing these world quests, what you'll come to understand is that some of the locations that these quests take place in are genuinely stunning. And even more than that, there's been a very conscious effort by the developers to tailor the experience around those environments to really make us, the players, stop and bask in their beauty. And in certain situations, they even build mechanics around them. I mean, as much as I hate the Asmoday Quest, and God knows I do, I'm willing to argue that if I wasn't as invested in Genshin's lore as I am, I may have actually enjoyed parts of that quest strictly because of how beautiful its setting was. Whether it was the Liyue section of the quest that dropped you into this gorgeous landscape while introducing that incredibly unique painting mechanic where you take paintings from a sheet and place them into reality, literally reshaping the world around you. A mechanic that, after enough use, completely transforms the entire environment by the end of that section. Or even later on in the quest, when you descend into the part of the temple that the game very fittingly calls Hell. I mean, you have this dark, shadowy, almost suffocating landscape, a place that honestly doesn't even feel like something you'd expect to see in Genshin Impact. And then when you finally get to escaping it, you still come to understand that throughout that entire sequence, the game constantly throws new sights and experiences at you. Whether it's the sight of that huge malevolent hand that you find yourself flying towards, or the mirror room you eventually find yourself in after, that shows you a reflection of all the regions you have visited and even some that you have really never seen before. I mean, putting everything else aside, that world quest was simply a visual delight. And honestly, the exact same thing can be said for this new quest. I mean, just like the previous, this world quest also gives us multiple moments where I genuinely stopped and stared simply because of how incredible everything looked. I mean, we're talking moments like this.
This place is huge! Is this some kind of weapons base?
I mean, this isn't even a full open world that we actually get to explore fully. It is more so closed and somewhat semi-linear, which is a bit of a shame, but my god, just flying through this region, seeing how dark and unsettling everything is an experience in and of itself. I mean, there is lore tied to this place, obviously, but what impressed me wasn't just the lore itself, it was how simply flying through these environments gave me a glimpse into the mindset of the people this story was talking about. I mean, without a single cutscene, without a single line of dialogue, just by experiencing the environments, I began to understand things. My imagination filled the gaps for me. I did not need the game to explicitly explain every little detail because the visuals had already done a large part of that work. And really, I was completely satisfied with that. So yes, I'll be the first to admit that when it comes to visual presentation, these world quests, this one especially, shows just how much Genshin Impact has improved. Now we get into what really separates this world quest from the Asmoday World Quest. The reason why I, and I would imagine a lot of you, if not flat out all of you, view this quest on a completely different pedestal. And I think the best place to start is with the focus of the quest itself. Because see, when you look at the Asmoday World Quest, what it focuses on, the journey it takes us through, the reason the traveler decides to embark on it in the first place, you begin to realize that calling this quest a step backward wouldn't really be unfair. Especially when you think back to what Genshin Impact itself promised when the developers first talked about Nordcry. I mean, as we all know, version 6.0, Nordcry's release, was never originally part of Genshin Impact's roadmap. It was an entire region that was added later in development. And the reason for that addition was actually very interesting, because what we heard was an admission. The developers essentially acknowledging something that we players had always known for years, that the game had simply created too much, too many loose ends, too many unanswered questions. And the majority of those mysteries had very little to do with the game's actual central narrative. I mean, let's be honest, the main story alone already had enough on its place. We had to find our siblings, we had the Abyss, the Archons, the Shades, the Heavenly Principles, every single one of which having entire storylines and lore of their own. So the developers made it very clear that Nordcry would focus on exactly that, the core mysteries of Genshin Impact, the questions we've been waiting years to have answered. And really, after everything we've experienced in Nordcry, I think it's safe to say that they were not lying. I mean, in just the first 4 versions of this region, we arguably received more meaningful lore than we got in the first 5 years before Nordcry even existed. We learned about the Sinners, the 3 Moon Sisters, we got much deeper understanding of the Fatui as an organization and several of its members. We even closed the narrative thread that had been left hanging for 4 years just in the last main story. I mean, regardless of how any of us may feel about the presentation of those stories, one thing became absolutely clear. Nordcry built a region around lore. But then we get to the Asmoday World Quest and suddenly it is a completely different story. I mean, think about what this quest is centered around. A character we've only truly seen once, 6 years ago, at the very beginning of the game. I mean, out of everything Nordcry could have explored, this was arguably one of the biggest opportunities to finally answer some of Genshin Impact's oldest question. Who exactly is Asmoday? Why did she do what she did? What is her connection to the Traveler? What is her relationship with the Shades, the Heavenly Principles? I mean, there was so much this single world quest could have explored. But instead, what the quest chose to focus on had almost nothing to do with any of that. I mean, fundamentally, it did the exact thing the developer said was the reason Nordcry existed in the first place. It told an entire story that barely advanced the lore. And by the end of the quest, we weren't any closer to understanding Asmoday. We weren't closer to understanding the Shades or the Heavenly Principles, or any of the mysteries that made us excited for this quest to begin with. I mean, yes, the Leah segments that I mentioned before was beautiful, the environment was incredible, the puzzles were fun. But when you realize that everything you are doing has almost no meaningful connection to the very reason you started the quest in the first place, a certain sense of meaninglessness starts to settle in. And when you compare that to this new world quest, it is a completely different story. In fact, I'd go as far as to say that Nordcry was created specifically so whoever could tell stories like this one more than any other story we have gotten in this entire version sequence. I mean, as I said earlier, after I finished the story, there was a level of satisfaction that I hadn't really felt since Fontaine. Now, this quest doesn't give the same cinematic spectacle or the sheer emotional payoff that Fontaine delivered, no. What it gives us instead is lore, a lot of it. But the lore dump itself isn't what elevates the story. Rather, it is how the lore is delivered that I find absolutely genius. Because what Genshin does here is give us just enough information at every point in the story to elevate the setting we are currently exploring. For example, very early into the quest, just after heading into the moon, we're introduced to these temples. Now, in classic Genshin fashion, they are absolutely stunning. But here's the thing, we have seen stunning temples before, plenty of them. So as players, you appreciate the visuals for a few seconds, but beyond that, there's really nothing that immediately separates them from every other beautiful ruin we've explored. And the story completely understands that. So almost immediately, it introduces us to something called called the Eye of Igni Bellum, a device built to once again intercept communication the dragons once received from outer space. Massive Genshin lore. And then it immediately ties that information to these temples. It doesn't do so later on or as some random exposition dump, no. Rather, right there during the exact moments we're trying to understand why these temples matter. I mean, suddenly, these aren't just beautiful ruins anymore, they're communication devices. Devices connected to one of the most important pieces of lore in the entire game. And just like that, interest in them skyrockets. But what makes this even better is that even with how important all these settings are, no setting overstays its welcome, which is honestly very different from how Genshin usually writes both its World Quest and, if you're being honest, even some of its Archon Quest. I mean, normally, after a lore review like this, I prepare myself for another 20 to 30 minutes of puzzle solving, or slowly walking from point A to point B, while Paimon or any of our companions have conversations that don't really move anything forward. But that is not what happens here. The moment we learned everything we needed to know about the temple, the moment it served its purpose, the story moves on, straight to the next location, the next major lore reveal, the next big action sequence, and then immediately into the next setting after that. I mean, especially once we entered the moon, the entire World Quest felt like a roller coaster. I never found myself getting bored. If anything, I constantly wanted to keep going. I mean, the pacing, the way each lore review naturally led into the next, and how quickly the story kept evolving made me genuinely excited to see what the next area had waiting for me. I mean, really, for the first time in a very long time, I didn't just want to play Genshin, I wanted to experience Genshin Impact. And combining everything I just said with how beautiful some of these environments looked, and even more so, how amazing the entire soundtrack of this World Quest was, experiencing Genshin Impact felt really good. But what made the experience even better was the fact that this World Quest was voiced. Now, especially recently, I've come to appreciate Genshin's voice direction a lot less. I mean, in the last main story, you have Lilopar, a character associated with someone named Al-Akmar, a character who had a husband named Ormazd, and children named Shirin and Povezrovan, sounding like this.
What a long dream that was. It's been a while, my master. Oh, and you're here too, little wildcat. The four of us back together again.
And I don't know about you, but that really takes me out of the experience. Because Genshin, at least lore-wise if nothing else, is built around diverse regions and cultures. I mean, even the name I mentioned earlier, Igni Bellum, is something that immediately makes you imagine a completely different culture, a completely different people, a completely different way of speaking. Yet despite all of that, we still end up with what has become the default Genshin accents. And that has always been a disappointment for me. But still, putting that aside, having this World Quest fully voiced was honestly the icing on the cake. I mean, to be fair, this is something that they should have been doing with every important World Quest from the very beginning, especially considering how important these quests have become to Genshin's overall narrative. I mean, we've seen the Fontaine World Quest become relevant again in this very version. We've seen the Sumeru World Quest, a 3 to 4 year old story, suddenly becoming important to the story we got just a couple of weeks ago in Genshin. I mean, these quests have never been optional side content, they've always been part of the main story. And really, this World Quest perfectly demonstrates why they should have always been voiced. I mean, there's a level of immersion that comes from hearing actual people speak instead of simply reading text on a screen, hearing the emotion in their voices, feeling the weight behind every line. And really, nowhere is that more apparent than with Ninin, the character who this entire story is centered around. I mean, here's the character who starts the story barely able to put words together, only to end it with one of, if not the single most beautiful speech I have ever heard in Genshin Impact.
Hello? Hello, everyone. I am so glad to be able to send this message out into the mysterious vastness of space. I don't know if it will reach you, but if nothing else, let it at least dispel some of the silence that fills this cold universe. If you are out there and you hear this, then there must surely be some kind of special gravity that, like the moon, has captured us both.
Now, before ending this video, there are just a couple of things that I noticed that I either disliked or found genuinely funny. First, there is Paimon. I hate Paimon, I am sorry. I was kind of happy that this character got some meaningful growth in the last version, some self-realization as to the fact that she has not been particularly very useful, practically anyway, to our entire journey, other than pointing things out on the screen. And I was hoping that that growth would also show here, but no. We get the default Paimon doing every single thing default Paimon does. I mean, if there was one thing that consistently pulled me out of what was otherwise a phenomenal story, it was Paimon. Now, putting her aside, there was also something else I noticed lost while playing this quest. See, it almost feels like the developers accidentally proved that they can fix certain problems, and they just choose not to. And I think the best example of that is how the stamina bar was treated in this world quest. I mean, there are multiple moments throughout the quest where, because of how intense the sequence is, running simply doesn't consume stamina. And yes, I can already hear some Genshin players saying it's just a small change, it's not really relevant, but that's exactly the point. It is a very small change. A change the developers have now shown they can implement whenever they want. But rather, what we see are developers who would rather solve a 6-year-old problem for one specific quest rather than apply that exact same solution to the rest of the game. And that leaves me with one final question. Is this the kind of storytelling the developers now understand players like me, and I imagine many of you as well, actually want? Or is this world quest also just a temporary fix? Is my enjoyment of this quest something that is unique to this one experience? Are we simply going to enjoy this quest and then go right back to what we've always gotten, just like the stamina fix? I'll leave that question to all of you. So let me know in the comments what you thought of the World Quest. Do you agree with my analysis of what's made it work? Do you agree that it fundamentally one-ups the Asmoday World Quest? Or do you see things differently? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below, and as always, I'll catch you on the next one.